In the course of my studies, I remember digging up a very interesting little nugget about how a journalism, how a proper journalist might work. Uh, the description was that he might get a phone call, reporter might get a phone call from his editor who'd had word that there had been some sort of a body on the street down near where this reporter worked, and could he please go down and have a look and just see what he could see and see if there was a story there. Of course, there's bound to be a story if there's if there's a body on the street. The reporter goes down, of course, and what he does is he begins to review everything in sight. Right? People are pointing upstairs to the to a broken window at the fourth floor of an apartment building. There's glass on the ground. The person is dressed in such and such a way, or was, and the bystanders are interviewed. The reporter wants to know who saw what and when and whether noises, and he hears about things. There were noises. And he keeps on doing this, in the same sort of a way a detective might do it, obviously. He's got a story to find out, to uncover. So in the course of that, he just exhausts himself. He talks to the police. He talks to everybody who knows anything about anything, all right? Specifically related to this story. And he talks to him, and I'm sorry, then he takes his data. He's exhausted his sources. He doesn't see any more options. And so he takes his material and heads off home. And he begins to sift through it. And he looks through it, and he looks this way, that way, compares things. He sees this, and that doesn't go along with that, and this seems to conflict with that. And he works and turns these things around, and he finally sees how things are beginning to fit together. And he thinks he's got a pretty good handle on the story. Now, if he's a detective, of course, he's trying to get a good handle on who done it, if it's a murder or not, and who done it. And so he's got this concept. He puts it down in an outline form and sends it off to his editor, who after a bit thinks he's onto something. He has a chat with him, asks him about the material, and he thinks he's onto something. And so he says, "Write it up." All right. And of course the guy writes it up, and so it goes, right? Gabriel's asking about still life. The question was, could you please elaborate on how you set up a still life in your studio? I'm curious after seeing pictures of your workshops. I appreciate the question again, Gabriel, and I'm very pleased to share. But I just gave you the entire story of how I set up a still life. The systematic, I remember once, by the way, being in Gamel's studio and having worked on a still life. I just worked it over and over. I could not get this still life to resolve itself, so that I could say, yeah, this will be a good picture, and I tore it down. I mean, just finally, after weeks of messing with it. And anybody who's worked in the studio who really has an ambition to make a good still life will, and I'm saying a student, will have done that, because you're so much short of information, your own abilities, your own skills in the field of composition. Never mind and strategies to actually, getting the right stuff together and that sort of thing. So. So I was in the studio when I'd invited Gabriel to come down and critique on something else, perhaps a drawing. And he came in the studio and saw that my still life wasn't there. And he looked this way and that way, and finally decided he was going to consult with my wife instead of me. And he said to her, she happened to be around the corner, maybe even saying hello to him. He said next time he does something as dumb as that, or looks like he's going to, referring to taking down the still life, he said, could you just get a straitjacket on him quick? And of course, an experienced person, a Gamel, a teacher, would know whether or not a still life was moving in any kind of a reasonable direction. And Gamel wasn't this kind of guy who would set a still life up for you by any means. He would watch you struggle and make suggestions, and it would go that way. And you would go on and on, trying to resolve it for yourself without having somebody come in the room and do it for you, which is, everybody knows this, right? Everybody sees this kind of stuff. Either if you have students, you see it from your students. If you're a student, you've done it. So I just resolved not to have that dilemma. You can't waste 3 weeks trying to set up a still life. Now you could say, well, the still life is a great one. It's going to last forever. So what difference does it make? That's a good point. I mean, it's a reasonable point. But then I ran into someone who produced in the neighborhood. I mean, it's Bob Hunter, who produced in the neighborhood of 50, or could produce in the neighborhood of 50 portraits. I mean, still lifes, I believe he said, in a year. And so I thought about what he was doing, and and of course his idea was you need to sell a lot of pictures, and you're not going to sell every single picture you paint. So if you want to make a living, you got to have product, and all that, right? And it's true. So his idea was to limit himself to a particular kind of design, and and I would simply say the pyramid, and he became a master of pyramid making, Now, he's also a really good colorist, so he isn't leaving steps out, so to speak, but he does. But that was an area where I didn't feel like I wanted to actually limit myself. I didn't feel like I wanted. First of all, I didn't want to be a hunter, right, Bob Hunter. Much as I liked his work, the last thing I want to do is be somebody else. I hope, and but I hadn't resolved the question of how in the world would you set up a still life fairly quickly, and have it have reasonably predictably good results every time. It's always the same thing in painting, isn't it? The efficiencies, and then the combination of the efficiency and the quality, that you're trying to get in the same page all the time. So in the course of but I set myself on that task. I just said, I've got to find that way. I've got to find a way where, I'm more systematic, where I can predict the results, where I can actually get good results every time. And so before I knew it, I found myself in a place that I'll describe to you, and I'll show you what I do and what I recommend students do, and I have them do in the studio, and they do get good results up to a point, right? And that's up to the point of where their knowledge about composition is still being informed, right? Which is a big deal. I mean, it's a significant thing. The reason I do a course on composition, a workshop on composition in a class, is because you need to have that underpinning. But nevertheless, there is a best way to process to go through. I mean, there's a best process to get yourself to a reasonably good still life result every time. And I'll just lay it out for you, but it's parallel to the process I just described to you. So I make it, there's 4 parts. One part I call collecting the junk. The second part I call junk, still life junk. Go to the antique store, buy junk, wherever you got. I mean, fruits, vegetables, whatever you want, preferably things that aren't going to rot fast if you're a student. And, but collect the junk, right? Second part is study the junk, just exactly like the journalist. Study the junk. See what you got. See what does what with what fits together. Where's the story here? Now it's not a story in a narrative sense for a painter. There will always be a narrative element, but it's not a narrative that you're looking for. It's actually it's a visual product. It's beauty. It's pattern and spotting and color scheme and all those things. Those are the things that are the stuff of the music of the eye, right? Of course, there'll be a narrative on some level, and there can be from the beginning, but you're going to give yourself a headache if you haven't resolved the first problem, which is how to make a good color scheme, for example, every time, et cetera, right? So I suggest a student don't mix that together. Don't try to get into this question of what am I telling about? What's my great profound idea? Separate these problems. That's a different problem for a different day. This problem was one of collecting junk and organizing the junk on a tabletop or wherever you decide to organize it. And so you have a collection of junk, or you're trying to make a collection of junk. Now, is it just any random thing? No, you're collecting for a very specific, limited, narrow unity. And yet, remember, this is all about unity and variety, but you're also collecting widely in a different way, right? So what we do is we unify. What I ask students to do is find some object, and frankly, I don't care what, preferably something you'd rather like a little bit, and then go and collect, color only, until you have a pile of stuff that belongs in that, with that thing, by color. So if it's a green object, find the right red for it, the right yellow. In the triad mentality, it's always the element of threes, right? This feeling of threes. So you're always thinking, let's find the red, yellow, or blue, right? So you take an object, say it's any color, green, red, some other number, and whatever the alternate is, you go and find those that go with it. Some people say they can't wear red, and the fact is everybody can wear red. You have to find the right red for your skin tone. And in that way, you're talking about getting the right, say you have this kind of green, there's a best red for that green in the purely visually pleasing sense. Now, people don't know this because they don't do trial and error enough. But once you do this, and I have recommended before to other people that they really want to understand color and have their own color theory, what they need to do is collect junk that goes together. And before you know it, you'll realize that something's happening here, that certain reds don't go with certain greens. Certain reds go brilliantly with certain greens, and around the horn, So if you follow what I'm saying, collect for the unity of color, but collect for variety in every other way, right? So, and so when I say variety, what I really want is a whole variety of values, a whole variety of sizes of objects. I want a whole variety of textures of objects, busynesses, some simpler things, maybe some simple things like that, some things less simple, like this cup with a handle. Collect, with the idea in view that you don't want two things the same in the picture. Doesn't mean you couldn't have two or even three things the same in a picture. In fact, you usually do want that as you begin to organize. So, for example, if you decide to use a peach, you probably want three peaches. So I'm not saying it in the simplistic sense, but if you're using peaches, then you're looking for other variations on that color, more neutral, more light, more dark, more whatever, and do that. Just do that mindlessly. Okay, just collect to the unity of color. And your pile of junk will be just right. The unity of color is the equivalent of look, a murder happened or a body's laying out here, and I'm trying to find out all the parts that actually go to that, right? So I'm saying the unity we're talking about, just the unity of color. Just get stuff that belongs together coloristically, and you're 3/4 of the way home, or some number. I'll give you a different number in a minute. The second part of it, though, is go home and study your junk. So then, and what that means is you take all the stuff you've collected on the street, and you go and begin to look at it in the lighting you're going to paint in. Just observe it, look at it. Don't try to set up a still life. Just look at it. I mean, this cup, turn it over, see where the cool stuff is. It's yellow on the inside. It's more interesting shape-wise when this handle sticks out, or it has this side over here with the writing on it. You have all the stuff to consider when you're looking at this single object. But then you'll pick up a different object. Maybe it'll be this book, which obviously doesn't really look like it's going to go that well with this cup. But you'll say, so now I'm looking at this book. How many things can this book do? You look at this book and you realize that this book can do a lot of things. It can do that. And it can be set in ways in relation to the light that do all sorts of dramatic things. It can be stood on end like a vertical. It can be, so there's so many things this can do. And then there's the question of what they do together. How this might silhouette that, for example, and how the light here might play to some other aspects of the light, say, of this book. And you're beginning to get part two done, right? You're studying your stuff. And what you're looking for, ultimately, is who the best players are. That is to say, the players that will produce the greatest, most magical center of interest in the combination, right? Now, I always say in the combination because a still life painter doesn't really want to paint a cup. I mean, you can do it, but somebody else already made the cup. What are you, a photographer? But it's in the combinations of things that you begin to make your music, right? So it's never going to be the cup. It's going to be the cup and something, right? It's the cup plus. So if you can maintain that process right through this whole pile of junk. Let's say you have 10, even 15 or 20 objects, and you won't find you have to collect that extensively. I like Ang's comment that he said, "Give me 3 objects, and I'll give you a still life." It'd be nice if it were simply that simple. You can, I can give you a nice still life with any 3 objects too. But you don't put yourself into that position. You say to yourself, it's almost like saying somebody, just give me a bunch of junk, any old junk, and I'll make you a really great meal. Give me a bunch of junk. Well, a good chef isn't going to say that. He's going to say, give me the best quality this and something like that and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? You got to put something together for you. It's going to be nutritious and this and that. Of course you can make, if you're left with nothing, if you're a chef, you can make something out of that. So you understand the difference is significant. But so you've studied your junk and you find yourself coming up with a combination of things that is clearly magical, more magical than any other combination in the entire thing, which, by the way, if you haven't looked through, you won't know where the good stuff is if you haven't really done this well, right? You got to do your research. Surprises happen all the time, I find. And just get yourself around that idea of giving it a good look and good look and good look until you finally find those 2 or maybe 3 things that just have to create this dynamic drama, if you want to call it that. And I only mean magic for the eye, you know what I mean? Just fun patterning, fun shape making, fun light, value distribution, just fun stuff. Adds variety. It's always the question of variety in the center too, all right? So, I argue that you want your best colors, your best of everything. As part of your center of interest. I mean, why do you want some happy, beautiful color sticking out of here somewhere and your center of interest over here? Some new odd color. You wouldn't want that, right? You build on the center of interest. You extend whatever the center of interest is doing out through the, through the hustings, out through the rest of the frame, shall we say? Now, what you do as part 3, you simply take you got this in your head, right? You know exactly what you think this is going to be as a picture. So I suggest you turn around or you walk across into a different room and sit down with a piece of paper and make a thumbnail. That's a dumb, I say cartoony scribble. Think Rembrandt, not values, just apple shaped like that with the stem staying out. Apple, if that's what you're doing. There's the apple. Here's the plate, and it's going to land right there in relation to it. There, those 2, and then you see what I'm saying, and just scribble those, draw them. And when you think you've got about where they did that magic you thought you saw, then go ahead and put a frame around it. Just scribble the frame right on that. Just again like Rembrandt, or anybody else who's doing thumbnails, they'll do the same thing. You'll find frames around Leighton, scribbles, everybody. They put a little frame around it, begin to see what they got here. So, and you're going to do that as a thumbnail. It's because it needs to stay in your mind. You need to own this in your mind. And then what you're going to find, and by the way, this is just me talking about what I've found, what I do, right? I'm not telling you what one must do, but this is something you may be interested in exploring, Gabriel. And the rest of the world is not much use, that's okay. But then the trick is now, remember, that was the outline that the journalist would have taken to his editor and said, what do you think? And of course, you're the what do you think guy. And he says, well, write it up. It looks pretty good to me. Why don't you write it up and let's have a look? And that's when you go, write it up means walk into the other room, take this pile of stuff and see what it does. See if it really does what you think it does. See if the magic's there. And then getting to the rest of a still life is really just a question of extending the ideas associated with that, which I can't even begin to tell you. We're talking about composition at that point. But search that out. Let that be at least, with the limits of your knowledge of composition, that'll at least be give you a predictable, systematic platform for doing a good still life every time. And as you get to know composition better and better, you're going to find it just starts flowing in a way that's very surprising, very intuitive, very I don't know. Fluid is probably the most important word. It just has a way of just flowing when you get into the system. So anyway, that's the sales job on that one. But I'd suggest you try it and get back. System is the key to this stuff. I remember reading, I've talked to some of you guys earlier because I'd read about a guy who had decided he was going to do some study on memory. And so he had somebody memorize numbers, and the guy could remember sequentially 84 numbers, but he couldn't get past that number. And but in the course of things, it seems like the same guy who was able to memorize 84 coached somebody else, and this person was able to get up to 484, shall we say, numbers. I mean, and I'm badly misphrasing all this sort of stuff, but you'll find, you're going to simply find that What was I even telling you that for? uh, but there are, you're going to find. I'm sorry. Yeah. So what he found is that there are systems. He actually found that these guys were actually creating systems so that you could get a whole mass of 84 5 times. You know what I mean? So you could memorize in groups of 84 and get up to some huge number. Well, you're going to find that what I'm showing you, these ways of working, just take one for yourself and do the best you can with it. And before you know it, you'll find yourself doing better variations on it, the things that work better for you. But the idea of being systematic seems to be quite crucial to any success in our field. In fact, I think to being successful in anything, I think you just simply have to find best ways. And to find best ways, you have to take a way, select a way of working, and pursue it, wear it out, and something should occur to you. Something will trigger a better way in various aspects of it. And my description of all this stuff is barely adequate anyway. It's a lot easier to do with objects in my hand in the middle of a studio, and in the course of a longer conversation about composition. Anyway, thanks, Gabriel, for the question, and we'll see you all in another couple days. All right. Don't forget to share, comment, like. Somebody I see disliked the other day. Probably a bigger fan of Rembrandt than I am. So you're all welcome to. I appreciate any kind of comments. Somebody previously had commented that he thought I was jealous of Schmid. So I don't mind those kinds of things. They're food for thought. I mean, those are always possibilities, right? But no, but it's ideal to be constructive. I mean, if you want to say something that you disagree about a point, it'd be fun to discuss it. So I don't have a problem with disagreement or even dislike. But put a comment out there that has a counterpoint or something like that, and we can have some fun with that and talk back and forth. All right, good. Take care. Next time.